earlier today, I was watching the new episode of Invincible. I won't spoil it, but there's one very small part of a scene. It barely even constitutes a whole scene. It's just a small part of one, and it really made me think. It was so simple, so small and minute, but made me question things. In it, Omni Man cries, and it made me think. I know he's fictional, but still, if someone like Omni Man, who's basically an evil Superman, can cry, and it doesn't make you completely lose the respect for the character, and like, I didn't think it grew for me when he did that. It made him seem more human. It made Omni Man seem more like a real person. Just that one little detail made you think of everything. Can men in at least Western society cry? Can men be emotionally vulnerable, especially around women? Can they? I don't know yet. It's really making me question everything. Like, what is strength? First of all, one of the reasons I believe a lot of men believe they can't is because of a confirmation bias. They have a few examples and say that now all of them are. All women are like this. All for sorry, all future experiences will be like this one, two, or three. They take the minority and move it to the majority. At least from my experience, it's never made girls lose respect or feelings for me ever. If anything, it's made it grow. So that too has made me question maybe you can, you know? And honestly, the sources in which I learned you can't, probably not the best ones. Like, like someone like Andrew Tate. Well, not really him, but like, I feel like Hamza or Ali. Ali, definitely not, because, oof. I might make a video on that one day, but, and Hamza, I heard he's kind of a dick. I don't know a lot about him, though, but those are just like one or two people, and I can't say that because these people say now I need to prove it to everyone. And someone else who lots of people respect, I don't really respect because of some of the things he said that are very ignorant. That's Jordan Peterson. It made me actually really start to respect him. And I saw him; he was bawling, and it was like, wow, he really cares. He's not just a robot; he actually feels emotions, and he allows himself to maybe actually like respect him more. And I didn't really have respect for him before, so it's making me think like these men that I'm seeing crying, it's making me grow my respect for them. It's making me see that they're not. It's making me think they're not weak. It's so interesting. And some arguments against it I've heard are that people will, if you allow yourself to become too emotional, you make your decisions based off emotions. I think there's a big difference in that, and also just because it's not even necessarily bad to. It's not inherently wrong to make some decisions based on emotion. Some things you definitely should, but there's also a difference between making decisions on it and being controlled by it. If you're controlled by it, it's always emotion. If you make decisions based on it, though, it can also interject logic and other things. So there's many sources. It's good to get as many sources and places for ideas as possible. So be like as distributed as possible. Think like a portfolio for ideas, at least. As well as the fact that there's very few things that are bad in moderation. Like anger, out of moderation, anger is very bad. It can be so destructive and so dangerous. But you do need at least a little bit of it, or fear. People consider you weak for it, but you need some amount of fear. If you had no amount of fear, why not just jump out of a car? Or go in a deer costume during hunting season? Why not do these stupid things? Because what's there to be afraid of if you don't have fear? These things are bad, usually, at least have a bad connotation, can be used for good in moderation. And back to the control by emotion. It's just a question of, it's really just about not letting it dominate you, but you allow for it. You don't have to completely submit to it, just a little bit. Just listen to it a little bit, but not. You, Just because you open yourself up to listening to it doesn't mean you have to become controlled by it. You can have just a little bit. Just listen a little bit. Why not? It's your own self. You need to listen to yourself. We all do. And couldn't it be argued that rejecting it completely is more akin to weakness than strength? Completely just suppressing it. Isn't that weaker than allowing yourself to? It's like exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is very difficult, but it's very, very effective. Say you're afraid of the water. In exposure therapy, you try and be introduced to the water a little bit, little by little. It's like a vaccine. You take on a little bit of the virus, so that when you see the big one, it won't hurt you as badly. And here, you do a little bit, you just interact with it a little bit, and then to eventually, you can interact with the whole thing. Just like with different fears and anxieties. You allow yourself to feel them just a little bit, because it's so much easier, especially in our society, to conform and just hold it in. But it's a lot riskier. It's a lot more bold and brave to let yourself feel emotion. So many men are so afraid of it. It's honestly probably one of most men's greatest fears. It's being seen crying, especially in front of a woman they like or love. So if you do this thing that so many people are afraid of, wouldn't that make you stronger? Wouldn't that make you stronger than the vast majority of people who are too scared to do it? I think it's more gray than people will give credit to. It's not you can never cry in front of women or people, but it's not you should always. It's about saying that moments of vulnerability doesn't mean you have a lack of control. Just because you have a few moments where you're weak doesn't mean you are weak. You're not defined by individual actions, you're defined by the sum of them. You're comprised of each brick that lays down the foundation of what you are. That one time when you were vulnerable is just that one time. It doesn't mean that you now are. It doesn't mean that you are now weak or vulnerable. And why is vulnerability a bad thing? Like I said before, it's so much harder to be vulnerable, especially as a man, than it is to be closed off. It's so much easier to just say, fuck the world, completely apathetic, and just hide. It's so much easier. So much. And when you do bubble it up, especially in like popular media, we'll see this sadness turn into immense anger because they're not allowed to express it. And that's seen as better. That is seen as more productive, more manly. Just unleashing all your anger, just beating people up, breaking things. How is that any better? That's not vulnerability. That is a lack of control. Why is it a lack of control to let yourself just release and just cry a little bit so that you don't break something or beat someone up? You're showing a lot more control being safe, especially in a way that is safe for you and for others, than to just bubble it up, bottle it up, possibly hurt the people you love. These ideas they also play in part with lots of sexist dogmas, like, oh, you cry like a little girl. I mean, I don't really gotta explain. It's saying that women are more emotional, they lack self-control because it's pushes the idea that women are lesser, that they're not as smart, that they're not as capable, that they're not as whatever. It's all the same game, round and round. Everything feeds into everything else in our society. It all does. And the final little thing I want to ask: why or how? How is it more manly to cry in isolation than in front of others? In front of others, you're risking everything essentially. You're risking your entire reputation. You're risking losing respect from people, at least seemingly losing respect from everyone. But when you do it in isolation, you remove that. That shows fear. That shows that you are running away from the problem. That shows more insecurity. And that shows that you are more scared than being willing to do it out in the open where you could lose everything. And maybe you won't. Maybe it'll make your connection so much stronger. Maybe it'll make people actually listen and care about men's mental health.